Hello and welcome to Newshour from the BBC World Service, coming to you live from London. I'm James Kamara-Sami, and we begin today in Sudan, where 3 years after a popular uprising deposed the long-time dictator Omar al-Bashir, the northeast African country's progress towards civilian rule appears to be more uncertain than ever, following Sunday's resignation of Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok. The latest round of unrest dates back to October, when protesters took to the streets in large numbers after the interim military leadership removed Hamdok and his cabinet from office and placed them under house arrest. An effective military coup, even if its leaders refused to acknowledge it as one. Weeks of intense negotiations eventually led to the Prime Minister's release and reinstatement. On November the 21st, Sudan's army chief, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, spoke alongside Mr Hamdok at a joint news conference in Khartoum.
We've been living in a crisis for a long time. Thank God we're proud today that by signing this political decree, we're able to lay a real foundation for our transitional period, like we envisioned it and like the Sudanese people wanted at the beginning of the transition.
But the Sudanese people and most of the cabinet were unconvinced. Any faith they'd had in the military's commitment to relinquish political power had disappeared with October's events, and the restoration of a nominal civilian leadership failed to restore public confidence in the process. With huge crowds now calling for an immediate end to military rule, Mr Hamdok's position had been looking increasingly untenable. And on Sunday, after another round of protests in which at least 2 people were killed, he bowed to the inevitable. He confirmed his resignation in a televised statement that began with an ominous assessment of where Sudan stands.
I have tried my best to stop the country from sliding towards disaster. Sudan is crossing now a dangerous turning point that threatens its whole survival. I have decided to give back the responsibility and announce my resignation as Prime Minister, to give a chance to another man or woman of this noble country to continue leading our dear nation and help it pass through what's left of the transitional period to a civilian democratic country.
As yet, there has been no word of any potential successor, of anyone willing to grasp a chalice that is clearly filled to the brim with poison. Yasir Arman was a political advisor to the now former Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok. He resigned from his position after October's coup, during which he was detained by the military authorities. What is his reaction to the Prime Minister's resignation?
Well, I believe it was expected. It wasn't a surprise. It is part of the consequences of the coup in the 25th of October. It is a direct result of the coup.
Not surprising, but what does it mean for Sudan?
Well, it means there are more duties for our peoples, for the revolutions to do. Of course, this will entail more unity among the rank and file of the forces of the change and revolution. And at the same time, things are now black and white, those who are with the coup and those who are resisting the coup. The situation is a difficult situation for our people, but it is not the first one. The people are enthusiastic, are aware, are fully energized to realize civilians' democratic dispensations. It may take some time, but the coup is going to be defeated.
So is there anything resembling a transition now? Is there anything resembling the military and the civilians coming together? Or is it, as you put it, black and white? Is it either military rule or civilian rule now?
No, it is now military rule. The gap is widening between them as a result of the coup. The civilians, they were ready to work with the military before to realize a civilian-led democratic system of rule. This formula has been destroyed as a result of the coup. People, their demand is the same. They need themselves to be in the lead, to own the process.
There will have to be some form of talking, though, with the military, won't there? They clearly are not going to just step down by themselves.
Well, eventually there should be a clear settlement that will open the way for a civilian-led democratic system. This is not there now, unfortunately. It may require more sacrifices, more work, more resistance from the people on the street. People are aware and they are determined because there is nothing without price. Freedom always has a price, justice has a price, peace has a price, as you know. And people, they shown that they are determined and they will be what they want.
In his resignation statement, the Prime Minister warned that Sudan was entering a new and more dangerous phase. You've talked several times during this interview about the need for more sacrifice. It sounds as though you are expecting there to be more, perhaps a lot more bloodshed in the short term.
Well, we are not looking for a bloodshed. We are looking for democracy, for peace, for justice. It could have been realized easily if everybody is on board, especially the military. But in the absence of this, you can't succumb to dictatorships. The prime minister succumbed to the dictatorship, and that's why he's out now. But the people themselves, they will not allow themselves to be ruled by a dictator.
Tell us about your time. You were detained after the coup. How were you treated? Were you able to engage with the military yourself?
Well, at the beginning, I was treated very harshly and in a cruel way when they attacked my apartment and they attacked me personally. And they took me with more than 40 of men from the military service, and they beaten me at that time. But after that, I was in a confinement in a room for 29 days. Also, I have been investigated, and the case is still open, and I still face the same charges from the military junta. But I believe that this is not only me, it is part of the sacrifice our people are doing all over Sudan, and I have been always on the side of the people.
How confident are you, given the events of the last few months, that will happen?
No, I have no single shadow of a doubt that our people will prevail, democracy will prevail, the call for a civilian-led democratic dispensation will prevail. No matter what the sacrifices would be, we are in a difficult situation. But definitely we believe on our people, we believe on our cause, and we believe that this cause will get people to listen to everywhere in the world.
Yasser Arman, who is a political advisor to the now former Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok, speaking to us from Khartoum, where we're also joined now from the Sudanese capital by Volker Perthes, who's the special representative of the UN's Secretary General for Sudan. Welcome to NewsHour.
Welcome to you.
The gap is widening between the military and the civilians. That was the assessment of Yasser Arman. Is that your assessment too?
Well, I think he's right, but it is not widening from today. I mean, it has been widening for a while, even before the coup of 25 October, and it has been widening further after 25 October. And indeed, the coup brought Sudan on a slippery slope with more violence in the cities and with a deterioration of the security situation all over the country, particularly in Darfur, and with even less trust than there was between the political actors before.
What then does the resignation of the Prime Minister mean?
Well, I would say it ends one phase in the transition that started with the revolution of 2018, 2019, and with the constitutional document of 2019. That since the Sudanese people in the large majority have shown that they want a transition towards democracy and peace, I think we shouldn't call an end to the transition, but think about, and the Sudanese will have to think about, how they bring their country back to a transition path. And transition, of course, means that you get together, even if you have little trust or no trust into one another, that you start talking in an inclusive way about what the next steps are to actually rescue the country. I mean, this is a moment where things could go really bad, but it is also a moment where everybody could look at what is happening, and the Sudanese could agree to sit together and talk and find out what their common future is.
What possible trust after the coup can the civilians have in the military that it is committed to a transition?
Well, it's not a question of whether the one party has trust in the other. They don't. It's more the question of whether you can build trust and start rebuilding trust. It is, I mean, when you speak about a process of dialogue or a common conversation, you don't start with trust. If you had trust in the beginning, you probably wouldn't need that dialogue. But there is none, and whatever was there in trust before the coup has been shattered. I also think we should no longer speak in an idealistic way about a partnership between the civilian and the military, but what has to come out of a dialogue is at least a working relationship between the military and the different civilian forces and factions that rescues the country from going down a very violent way.
What now, in the immediate future, then, is the role of outside forces such as yourself to make that happen?
Well, we have been approached by different actors about our good offices, as we say in diplomatic lingo, which means that we have been asked to be prepared and to develop ideas about a dialogue or talks between all those factions that make up Sudan, civilians and also military, but the civilians themselves include a host of different political forces and ex-rebel governments and civil society and women, and not to forget youth and resistance committees. And indeed, we stand ready to facilitate such a dialogue between the Sudanese.
But looking at things as they stand today, has Sudan come any further than it was 3 years ago?
Well, if you compare the situation with 3 years ago, it's rather simple, because you could say, yes, Sudan has gotten rid of a 30 years dictatorship. And if you compare it with 1 year ago, it's more difficult to have a positive vision of things.
So it's sliding backwards.
Well, yes, it has been sliding backwards, but no slide backwards is eternal. I mean, you can stop it, and you have to stop it and bring it back on a movement forward.
You speak in terms of what needs to be done. How confident are you that it will happen?
Look, I'm not going to make predictions about the future here and about the success of our own work, but we will certainly spend our efforts to make it successful.
Volker Perthes, the UN Secretary-General's representative in Sudan, thanks very much for joining us here on NewsHour. You're listening to the BBC World Service.